up. Should I start over? We're in Bechukotai, the hope. Okay. When I in turn have been hostile to them and have removed them into the land of their enemies, then at last shall their obdurate heart humble itself. Obdurate means stubborn. And they shall atone for their iniquities. Then will I remember my covenant with Jacob. I will also remember my covenant with Isaac and also my covenant with Avraham. And I will remember the land. Yet even then, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not reject them or spurn them so as to destroy them, annulling my covenant with them. For I, the Lord, am their God. I will remember in their favor the covenant with the ancients, whom I freed from the land of Egypt, in the sight of the nations, to be their God, I, the Lord. So we know, like the Pasha, the simple explanation of these verses is there is these curses that are going to be put upon the children of Israel if they disobey the commandments. And one of the traditions that are done when they're reading the Torah, when they read these parts, the curses parts in the Torah, they really read really quietly, like you can almost barely hear it. And they do that because they want almost like we don't even want to hear it, and we don't want it to experience it, you know. But it's, you know, that's just one of the traditions. But these blessings and curses were to impress upon the Israelites how serious it is to be God's children and to follow His ways. And if they observe the commandments, they're blessed, and if they are disobedient, they are cursed. And it's up to them whether they want to choose which direction they want to go. But it's as a community. It's not, even as individuals, we may choose right or wrong. But if you're part of a community and you're the only one that's doing the right thing and the rest is all doing the wrong thing, you're going to be punished even though you're still doing the right thing. It's just the way it is, you know? Because we are people. We are more than just one individual. And so, but at the end, you know, God, it says God will forgive them and bring them back to their land, right? So we have that promise. And of course, in the prophets, there's other promises. There's other curses and promises also in the prophets in Jeremiah, Zechariah, and you know, and a lot of them. And so here we are going to read some of what the sages have said in the past. So it says, once Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Eleazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Akiva were going up to Jerusalem. When they reached Mount Scopus, they tore their garments as a sign of mourning. When they descended to the Temple Mount, they saw a fox running out of the Holy of Holies, and they began to weep, while Rabbi Akiva laughed. They said to him, Akiva, you always astonish us. We weep and you laugh. He replied, why are you weeping? They said to him, should we not weep when a fox emerges from the place no common person was allowed to enter? We have seen the fulfillment of the verse, because of Mount Zion, which lies desolate, jackals prowl over it. That's found in Lamentations 5, verse 18. And he said to them, that is exactly why I laughed. One prophet said, Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps of ruins, and the Temple Mount a shrine in the woods. That's in Jeremiah 26, verse 18. But there is another prophecy, that of Zechariah. There shall yet be old men and women in the squares of Jerusalem, each with staff in hand, because of their great age. And the squares of the city shall be crowded with boys and girls playing in the squares. Zechariah 8, verse 4 and 5. Since the words of the first prophet have now been fulfilled, so will the words of Zechariah be fulfilled. I therefore rejoiced, seeing the fulfillment of the first prophecy, because this means that the words of Zechariah will also be fulfilled. They said to him, Akiva, you have comforted us. So this incident with these rabbis, you know, it shows that you can be the half empty, the glass is half empty type, or it could be the glass is half full type. It seems like Akiva was more positive in his thinking. But they were also, after the first temple, about 40 or 50 years afterwards, they were able to come back and rebuild. And so I guess Rabbi Akiva was thinking that, it won't be too long before, after the second temple was destroyed, that they would start rebuilding. Of course, it's still not being rebuilt, right? It's been many, many years, right? But there was, that idea, that it will be fulfilled, and then Rabbi Hammer, the one who wrote this, he made his own commentary, and he was saying, because he grew up in the 40s, and he saw the state of Israel be created, and all the children of Israel going back to the land. So during this time, he was a teenager, and there was I guess a newspaper would publish various letters. So there was someone, an anonymous person, publishing letters about how the Jews shouldn't be able to go back into the land. But he, as a teenager, started writing letters to counteract his views. So they were going back and forth. I don't know how many letters, it doesn't say, but they were going back and forth with these letters in the newspapers. And then one day, the anonymous person stopped writing. So he didn't know if he really won the argument, but he felt like at least people would hear his side of the story, hear the side of the Jews, the story. And then, not too long after, there was a big celebration because the land of Israel was reinstated or whatever. And so all the community gathered together in one of the largest conservative synagogues in New York, and there's lots of fellowship and joy and songs and speeches given, and it was just a wonderful time, and it reminded Rabbi Hammer of this story about Rabbi Akiva, and he said, well, finally, we are able to come back into the land. It was a miracle. And he said at the end, he always wished that he could go and tell Rabbi Akiva, your timing may have been off, but we did come back into the land. So I thought that's pretty cool. I was commenting to, I think it was David last night, that as a growing up, I was never really taught about how important the land of Israel being reinstated was. In fact, I didn't even really talk about it much, which was kind of, I feel it was strange in a way. It was like the biggest news of my lifetime, essentially. I mean, it happened before my lifetime, but it's like the biggest news within, recent events. But you talk about World War II, but you don't talk about what happened after. So that's kind of, I thought it was pretty fun. But then later on, I learned, for me, it was like eye-opening. That's all I have. Yeah.
I just wanted to follow up with that. Is that in antiquity, other nations, when they, everyone, they had their own gods, right? Every nation, every country, they had their own god. Every people had their own god. And usually what would happen is when there was a conquering nation, if a nation went and conquered your country, your nation, then you were like, oh, I guess my God is weak, or maybe my God's false. And now we're going to worship the new God, the God of the people that came to conquer us. Mm-hmm. But with Israel, because our God warned us beforehand that if we disobey him, all these curses will happen. That was actually a good thing, because then when people conquered us, we didn't say, oh, our God is false, our God is weak. We said, no, this is our fault. Mm-hmm. We are the sinners, and it's our fault that we were conquered, and we never lost hope and lost faith. And I think the reason why, as a child, even me, growing up as a Christian, we were never taught about the importance of the rebirth of the nation of Israel, because Christianity has long held that the church replaced Israel, and that God no longer cares about Israel, and that the church is the new Israel, and the Jewish people are no longer God's people, and all that stuff, And I think it's only in recent times that the church is finally accepting the idea that God still loves the Jewish people, and there is still a covenant with the Jewish people, and that the Torah is still valid, and that at least the Jewish people should continue to keep the Torah, and that it is important for the prophecies of the end times coming. But when churches are very anti-Semitic, they don't want to admit that. They don't want to admit that, oh no, we didn't replace Israel, because that was a miracle. There never before in history has a nation been reborn and reestablished a language. That's a miracle. It's a miracle that happened, and it was prophesied. I don't remember where, but it says, can a nation be born in one day? And
cool. All right, Safa, you want to share with us?
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So it seems to me the overall picture of the portion is one of contracts. The first portion where it talks about if you do this, Hashem tells us if we obey him, we follow the covenant. We already made a covenant as a people at Sinai, so we made the decision to follow the covenant between us and Hashem, and he's given the parameters of the covenant if we disobey or if we obey. And we have to be careful. A lot of my previous religion, we had things like forgive and forget. We had slogans that really didn't have much meaning to them. There was an idea that salvation, you saved, and then that's it. You go and live your life. You're good. You're set free from sin, but then you can kind of figure out what sin is. But Hashem expects us to follow his commandments, and so even his contracts with us are conditional, and that's hard for us to fathom. Is that the responsibility for the contractual agreement is between Hashem and us, and he does, he said he's going to punish us if we don't follow the commandments, but yet he's going to bring us back. And then the second part of the Torah portion talks about, okay, if you're going to make a vow, here's the parameters. And they seem to be pretty steep. A rabbi from Galilee, Yeshua ben Yaakov, he was basically, don't make a vow at all. Just don't do it. Just say yes or no. And Shlomo Hamelech said two things about giving an oath. He said, a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds back. So a lot of times we get into this, I know me personally, I've made rash statements, of wanting to go save Africa or whatever it was in the moment of you get on the mountaintop and you're full of vigor. Thankfully, Hashem doesn't give men the way to say, no, never mind, I didn't really mean that. He gave us Yom Kippur, where we can say the Kol Nidre, we can annul our vows, but for women, they're given the opportunity through their husband or through their father that their rash vow can be taken away. Just think about that mercy. The second thing Shlomo Hamelech says is, it is a snare to say rashly it's holy and reflect only after making vows. So he says in a rash, when we say things rashly, there's whole sections of the Talmud that talk about vows, and it is a huge issue of basically, like Yeshua said, you should be careful of making open-ended vows, because Hashem is very explicit on what he expects of us. And so let our yes be yes and no be no, and follow his example, and we can stay on the good things. So, but anyway, so that's where I'm at. So, shalom, Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.